with that, would you let me call this meeting to order and call the roll?
Yes, sir. Bryant?
Present.
Ross?
Here.
Robinson?
Here.
Thomas?
Here.
Gaines?
Here.
Parker?
Here.
And Height?
Here.
A quorum is present.
Thank you, Ms. Whitby. Can we, since Alderman Witcher's not here, Alderman Height, if you'll lead us in the prayer and the pledge, we'd appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Bow our heads. Heavenly Father, we thank you for the opportunity to gather tonight in this great hall to conduct the affairs of this city, and we pray that you be with us in helping us, in granting us the wisdom and to do the things that's beneficial to everyone involved, not only on the council, but the residents of this city. And Lord, we pray for those military service men and women that are overseas today and tonight, protecting us for our freedoms. Lord, we pray that in the coming days and the coming weeks that you'll continue to bless not only this council, but these residents of this city. And Lord, we pray that you'll forgive us of any sins that we have committed, and everything that we say, everything that we do, and everything that we think, we hope will be pleasing in your sight. In Jesus Christ's name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Motion made, I assume, on the blanket motion? Is there a second?
Second.
I got you. Let me note, if anybody wants to pull it, they can. Item number 4 is a letter that I sent to you indicating that a gentleman, Keith Richardson, I understand he may be in the audience, Keith's right out here, is interested in building senior living, if I'm not mistaken. And where his interest is as you're going up Pershing, just past Memorial Drive on the left, the road where that stoplight is, the property generally up to the left. This is on the south side of Pershing, and I know I've had a chance to visit with a couple council members. I know that Councilmember Parker is extremely interested in the north side of that, and we conveyed to Mr. Richardson our strong interest in dealing with access on the north side. This is not nearly as challenging for the residents of Scenic Hill. A great amount of the traffic would be funneled through that stoplight that's at the bottom of Memorial Hill on Pershing. So I know that, at least in, not necessarily speaking for Alderman Parker, but I know his major concern, and at least as it was relayed to me, is on the other side of the road. So I just wanted to point out that as we accept and file, I'm asking you that while doing that, I intend to sign those letters. It's essentially, if you all recall, the letters that I am asked to sign in reference to tax credits, and we wanted to make sure that this was done with full council knowledge. So that's part of our understanding, and it's part of my request. So unless there's a request to pull that out, Ms. Whitby, on the motion to accept and file.
Bryant? Ross?
Yes.
Robinson?
Yes.
Thomas?
Yes.
Gaines? Parker?
Yes.
And Height?
Yes.
Mr. Richardson, I'll sign those letters tomorrow, and you can either pick them up or I'll send them, however you want to do that. Just visit with Becky tomorrow. Presentation. Is Representative Hyde here? Okay. All right. It shows a presentation. Did we get our check, or are we going to wait on that? We already got the check. Check's not in the mail.
Can we, the minutes?
Excuse me?
You still haven't done the minutes yet.
I'm sorry. Thank you. It's not on my little sheet here. It's on this sheet. Do I have a motion on the minutes of the last meeting?
So moved.
Is there a
Second.
second on the motion to accept and file the
Second.
minutes?
Bryant? Ross?
Yes.
Robinson?
Yes.
Thomas?
Yes.
Gaines?
Yes.
Parker?
Yes.
And Height?
Yes.
Let me go to the calendar, but before I do, let me just indicate to the community and those here that the Municipal League met last week. I saw a number of you that had a chance to attend some or all of that meeting. And let me underline a couple things that perhaps may need to be highlighted. Number one, is there were presentations on Main Street, and before me you see North Little Rock basically won 4 awards. One for the Best Public Improvement Project, that's Dickey Stevens Park. The second one was actually 3. The second one was the Best Upstairs dwelling, and that was down between 4th and 5th. And the third was the Best Main Street Director. Michael Drake was acknowledged as among his peers as the Best Main Street Director. The other designation that we received is one that we've received once or twice before, but it sure reflects a tremendous amount of work, and that is a Volunteer City of the Year. There were about 10 of us, and we were, if not the largest, one of the largest to receive that. And Fritz Friedel and all of the volunteers for the City of North Little Rock do an extra pat, or many extra pats on their back because of all of what they do, not only at the Hayes Center, but our Maritime Museum and on and on. So we are proud of our volunteers, and we're certainly appreciative of that honor. With those comments, let me go to the unfinished business. Ms. Whitby?
Yes, sir. Ordinance 07-124, Alderman Gaines.
Out of deference to some of the council members, even though I think this should be called an awesome piece of legislation made by the Planning Commission, I think it's the best planning commission in the state, we're going to hold it till Alderman Witcher gets back. And we'll answer all the questions and run to it then, and just let everybody just wait 2 more weeks.
Could I ask a question or two
Sure.
of the sponsor or the city attorney? I know it indicates that the administrative officer, who is that the planning director? Is that,
That would be the planning director. That's consistent with our zoning ordinance.
and does that also mean that he could indicate a designee if he chose to, or does he have to serve in that function if he wanted to so designate someone?
I think he could designate it to someone else, but while he's there, he should be the administrative officer. Like if he leaves, he can designate somebody to make those decisions in his stead, but while he's there, he would make those decisions.
We might go ahead and call it tonight then.
Excuse me?
Let's think about it, go ahead and call it tonight then.
Questions?
All right,
That's your choice.
let's do it.
All right, Ms. Whitby. I'm sorry.
Questions?
Okay, what we want to do is get it on the agenda if he wants to call it, and then we can go into that. Ms.
Move for
Whitby,
adoption.
Ms. Whitby, did you read it? No. Okay, let's read it.
Read 3 times.
This is an ordinance amending ordinance number 7697, the zoning ordinance, to add section 12.24, dumpsters and dumpster enclosures. Third and final reading.
Okay, now is there a motion?
So moved to adopt.
Motion to adopt, is there a second?
Second.
Now we're on discussion. Alderwoman Ross?
Okay, my only question is, Sue Corker's been here before, and she has an apartment complex on M Street, which is in Ward 1. There's 38 tenants there. She furnishes them with a dumpster. I mean, they're, actually the city, they can put out 38 trash cans, which is going to look totally trashy. They'll, it's going to be blown over or whatever, but she furnishes them with a dumpster. However, there is no way to enclose this one. Are there exceptions?
Well,
And I went by and took pictures today, if anybody wants to see that. I mean, there's no way. So, especially in apartment buildings like that, don't want 54, trash cans on the side of the road when
No,
you can
we
have
wouldn't want
one
that at all,
open dumpster.
but logically, the administrator of the system would be able to do that and make those type of sections if they're warranted. So on the other hand, we have some apartments in the 3rd Ward that are not taken care of. They look like, you know what, and they may use the same excuse, and that's why we designated someone to handle that would use some logic and common sense and not mistreat anyone and make some kind of decision. Because like Ms. Corker's, I'm sure she's absolutely correct. Down there, I've been trying to get them near apartments near Edgewood Cemetery to clean that dumpster up and get it away, and they just ignore me. And it's just some way difference that we can make a difference. And I'm sure that they can appeal to the board, sign board, or whoever it was.
They go to the Board of Adjustments?
Board
Is
of
that who?
Adjustment, uh-huh.
Because I told
Yes.
her I thought that's who. Okay.
It is, yes.
As long as that she has a way.
yeah, the way I read this is Section 1B says, existing dumpsters which in the judgment of the administrative officer meet the intent of this section shall be exempt from the specific requirements herein. And that gives a great deal. Now, our city attorney can add to that, but in a virtually difficult, if not impossible, or unnecessary, fact situation because of the topography or because of the lay of the land, so to speak, that Mr. Voiles, in this case, as we've understood, thinks that it's virtually impossible to meet this, then can, essentially waive the requirements of this section. Now, that's the way I read it. Is that?
Yes, obviously this vests the administrative officer, who's Mr. Voiles, with lots of authority as to existing dumpsters that are in place right now. As to say whether or not, the owners of those locations, are meeting the intent of the regulation as best as it can be met. And that would be a decision he would have to make. And then his decision would be appealable.
To the Board of Adjustment.
To the Board of Adjustments within 30 days. That's our standard rule of appeals.
Alderman Ross?
Just so the Board of Adjustments understands that there are exceptions that, okay.
Alderman Thomas?
Yeah, one of the things that I mentioned to Alderman Gaines, I know there's many of those people that dumpsters are certainly in compliance. There's a few that are not, and I know over the years it's always kind of bothered me that we would pass an ordinance to take care of that affects the whole city. Like in my case, from all the way from I guess out in Maumelle to Mavericks trucking on the other side, and they'd be affected, and yet just a few is actually caused this, and that happens on so many other things that we do, and that always bothered me a little bit that we'd do that rather than to take care of the problem than not affect everybody. I know the schools, for instance, all of the schools, they're going to be affected with that, and many of the people who have no problem at all they'll have to spend some money, and I would think even the cost is going to go up for those people that have to do that.
One of the things, Alderman, that makes me feel somewhat comfortable with some of the unknowns is that it appears that in the legislation, everyone is given virtually a year to come into compliance. And if we start having an uprising within this year as we do it, then we all have an opportunity to address it by legislation if we chose. So with that year of sort of grace, because as I read it, none of this will be affected. None of the folks who were, quote, finally determined not to be in compliance by the administrative officer, there won't be any action that can be taken until the end of the year. And we have, 24 council meetings, or 23 now, that we would be able to address this by the end of the year if we wanted to give another year or if we wanted to do away with it. So, this is sort of, hands off for a year, and we start giving people an idea of what they may be facing, and then we'll have a chance to address it if we chose. So that sort of reduces my concern in terms of moving down the road.
And also moving down that road too, if those 6 or 7 or 8 are causing those problems, they ought to clean up and make it a lot better for the rest of them. Some of them, even in your ward and my ward, I'm sorry, they're just nasty, filthy dumpsters, and we ought to do something with it.
I just rather take care of those, though, than to make it effective for everybody.
Yeah, I'd like to put about $250 fine a day on them too, but can't get that passed.
All right, one at a time. Alderman Height.
I have a question. Behind Lakewood Village is there's what, 8, 10 dumpsters behind Lakewood Village? At least. Now, if I'm reading correct in section B2A, the installation of a screening needed to prevent the dumpster from being seen from a city street or other right-of-way, or 2, a residence regardless of the zoning. The dumpsters behind Lakewood Village have got houses, the back of houses facing Lakewood Village.
That's not our intent, though. It was only if there was a view of a...
It can be seen, though, from a residence. So are the dumpsters behind Lakewood Village going to have an enclosure?
Robert, what's the planning commission's
I have a
intent?
question.
And are you asking about an enclosure or screening? Because it says it has to
Could be
be
an opaque
screened.
A screening can be accomplished by either a full dumpster enclosure, a partial dumpster enclosure, 1, 2, or 3 sides, a 6-foot opaque fence,
Yeah, that does.
et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So if the houses were not there, the residences were not there behind Lakewood Village, those dumpsters would not have to have a enclosure. Is that correct?
That's correct.
But there are houses back there of which the residences, the back of the residences are the ones that are facing the back of Lakewood Village. So do those 8, 10, 12 dumpsters have to have an enclosure?
Mr. City Attorney, and then
There has to be something to screen them from view from those homes.
the answer would be, I
think it'd be
would
yes.
read it, the answer is yes, and they'd have to put some kind
That's
of...
the intent of it, too.
Alderman Ross?
I mean, they can plant shrubs. I mean, it's not, and most of those houses have privacy fences, because I have friends that live there, don't they?
But it doesn't say anything about the privacy fences on residences.
Well, we
It
use
says
common
that-
sense.
But if there's
though.
already a fence there, they're not going to...
No, they don't all have privacy fences.
Right.
6-foot opaque fence
Put out two
located
red
between the
tops.
dumpster and the nearest location.
Owner of the dumpster to screen them.
What-
Good question.
I need one more question. The school, say in Lynch Drive, if you're behind the school, of course, you can't see it from the road anywhere, but they'd have to have screening there too on those schools, is that right? Nobody
Right now-
back there.
Right now, we don't have any exceptions in there for schools. Because those exceptions don't exist, I mean, I'd have to say yes.
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't be any different. It wouldn't be any different for schools than it would anybody else. If it's nasty, dumpsters, and overwhelmed, what's the difference?
Well,
Clean them up.
You'd have to get on the four-wheeler to get around behind the school to see them, but
Only if there are houses there, and not if you're hunting.
Right, and to be clear, what it says regarding the screening is it has to be screened to prevent them from being seen. If you can't see them,
by whom? Seen by whom?
it says from a city street or other right-of-way or from a residence
They
if
can't-
somebody's at their home.
Okay, no residence or no street, you wouldn't see it, but that's okay,
Then
go
it's a
ahead.
non-issue.
It's not,
Okay, any other discussion? Alderman Grant?
I think the mayor's brought up one issue that's important, that is that it's a year. The second issue is that Mr. Voles and his office have the discretion to allow, in some cases, to allow people to not screen the dumpsters if they're not physically possible to do it. And that's what I was looking for in the ordinance.
Is that your determination too, that he has that discretion?
I don't, I
mean,
mean, I
if-
don't have that discretion.
No, I mean,
Mr.
if-
Voles.
It goes to the Board of Adjustments.
that's what the ordinance says.
Well, yes, and it goes two ways.
Board of
It has-
Adjustment.
It has to be screened to the maximum extent that it can be screened. That's a decision for the administrative officer to make, and his decision is appealable to the Board of Adjustments.
And don't forget, I don't want to catch anybody off guard, but the second part of this is for the new, for new dumpsters. No one's talked about that, but keep that in mind. It's just, if this is passed tonight, then the new dumpsters that come into the city would have to follow these regulations.
Yeah, and like I said, one of the things that has me somewhat comfortable is that, you know, if we start finding that there are unique situations that this just really doesn't fit in terms of the initial judgments of the administrative officer, you know, then we have a chance to fix it before anything goes into a penalty January 1st of next year. So there perhaps are, and we can give further guidance by legislating exceptions that would be based on fact rather than supposition at this point.
Could we hear from anyone who wants to speak on it, because we're going to vote on it, looks like?
If our practice is if a council member wants to, you know, make that request, we let folks do it. So, you know, if anyone wants to make any comments, feel free. The microphone's open.
Mayor,
Right?
Mayor,
Oh.
I'm going to need
All right,
public
we are
comment
going to
first.
need, we know Sue, but, you know, our city clerk has got a well-founded point. So we need to have a form filled out, Mr. Baggett, that she can know the spelling and all that. So feel free, but fill out a form while you're standing there.
Okay, I'm Sue Corker, and it's true, I have two dumpsters on M Street, and the first apartment complex is the first thing off of JFK. And it is true, I have 38 tenants that live in 4 apartment buildings, and I have 2 dumpsters. And my dumpsters sit right close to the street. And my dumpsters are always picked up. Y'all were by there. They're not nasty. But my tenants all pay their own water bill. And if I can't, if nothing can be done, then we'll put 38 garbage cans lined up there on M Street. And when the wind blows, they'll blow down on JFK. So that, I don't have to have those dumpsters, but the cleanliness of it is tremendous when you've got 38 families and 38 garbage cans. You don't want that, because I don't know that they would put them out and pick them up. You know, they just don't do that. And this way, they're free to put their garbage in the dumpster whenever they get around to it. So, I mean, that's, you know, I can just have my dumpsters picked up, but then that causes a much more serious, really nasty problem. So I hope we can work something out for mine. And it is impossible to screen those dumpsters in any way. So they would just have to be removed.
Okay, I understand that.
Good evening, Mayor. Sam Baggett. The Planning Commission worked really hard on this, and, you know, we would appreciate your consideration for a yes vote. We have legislation in the city where garbage cans can't be set out before a certain time because they're unsightly. People don't want to look at them. And I wouldn't want to look out my window and see a nasty dumpster sitting out there. It needs to be covered up, something. No dumpsters in public right-of-ways. I would, you know, a yes vote for some kind of legislation to do something with the dumpsters. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing nobody, whoops, all right. Mr. Ard, you filled out a card. You need to fill out a card.
I do 99 2/3% of the time. I hadn't got it ready for the final comment tonight. I think I got a question from the dumpster people, and I told them I'd ask it tonight. If I understand this legislation, they're still going to have it where they can just drive in, they don't have to get out of their vehicles and open gates?
Unfortunately, that's the only way I can pass it right now. But I wish they wouldn't have to do that. I wish we could do something to every dumpster in the city, but we can't. But yes, they can do that. They're being grandfathered in over a period of a year to be able to do that.
Okay, but when they enclose them, are they going to have to put doors on them where the driver of the truck has to get out and open the gate before he can do his job?
I don't believe we have them 1, 2, or 3 sides. So obviously there'd be one side would be left open.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome very much.
Seeing no one else, I'm going to go ahead and call this session to a close. And is there any further discussion?
Question.
All right.
Alderman Gaines, the ordinance that I'm sharing with Alderman Parker, B2B, it says screening may be accomplished by a full dumpster enclosure. And then underneath that it says a partial dumpster enclosure, 1, 2, or 3 sides. Right. To me, a full dumpster enclosure means 4 sides.
It does.
City Attorney?
Yeah, the magic word would be at the end of the section 5 down there at the
Any
bottom. It says
combination
or,
of
the word or, and any combination of the above. So what can reasonably be used? You can put shrubs on one side, you can put a fence on the other. You know, there's no sense in enclosing more than one side or screening more than one side if only one side can be viewed. If 2 sides could be viewed, then 2 sides could be screened. And it could be a combination of, evergreen shrubs and some fencing or, one or both or like it says here, any combination of the above.
The way it's explained to me to make sure is it could be 1, 2, or 3 sides and still not have to have a lock.
Like Mr. Ard said, and I've heard from one of the companies that services the dumpsters in North Little Rock, and they're concerned about having 4-sided dumpsters like they do in Little Rock with a gate that they got to stop their truck, they got to get out, they got to open the gate, and then they got to get back in their truck, then they go in, service the dumpster down, and then they got to get back out, get out, and close the gate again. And that's only going to raise cost of servicing that dumpster.
And I think that rule, and Robert may correct me here, but I think that the Planning Commission has been requiring doors over dumpster enclosures on all the new ones that have been put in. They've been doing that for quite some time. Am I right?
Yeah, it depends on where the dumpster is located. If it's in the back, in industrial areas, they're not required. If they're in the side yard, they can come around maybe and grab the dumpster that way. A lot of businesses, though, are opening the gate when the night before the dumpster is serviced, so they're handling it that way. But generally, we require full screening on all new construction.
I don't disagree with the intent and purpose of this ordinance. I just think that there are some sections on it that may put some undue hardships on people or entities that have dumpsters. But I agree with the purpose and the intent of this ordinance, and that's to clean up North Little Rock. And if I wouldn't be serving on the City Beautiful Commission, if I wasn't agreeing with the purpose, I just think that there's a section or two, or possibly some sections in this ordinance that might create an undue hardship on some people that have dumpsters.
And
Now, after a year, correct me if I'm wrong, but we have a year before this ordinance is really going to be implemented.
Before we would charge fines, I mean, we'll be trying to work with the community and try to get things understood that by January of next year, they'll need to be screened.
What we'll be doing this year, if this ordinance is adopted, is we'll start looking at the dumpsters, and we'll decide, like in Sue's case, whether there's something that can be done and or should be done, and she'll get a letter, I'm sure, not to pick on anybody, but and if she doesn't like that letter, then and disagrees and says something can't be done, then it'll be appealable either through negotiations, first of all, but then secondly, it'll be appealable to the Board of Adjustment. And then thirdly, it obviously is appealable to this council, because we'll have a chance to change it by the end of the year if we think Robert and or the Board of Adjustment aren't following the do-right rule, assuming that it's adopted. Any other questions? Motion made and seconded to adopt on third and final. Ms. Whitby, call the roll. Oh, do you have another one?
What about the historic district? What are we doing about that? I mean, will they be required to go by the historic guidelines?
I don't know if there's any
or-
exceptions on that.
I don't think so.
The historic district.
There's no exception. I know that there was some concern at some point because there's a repealer clause in here, and I think someone had expressed a concern earlier that we may repeal a more restrictive rule that was put in place. If council's concerned about that, I can give you a pretty quick amendment. I can tell you it wouldn't function that way. A general repealer doesn't repeal specific legislation, but if you'd like to amend that repealer clause to make sure that the historic district is preserved, then I'd be happy to offer you one.
I just don't think we should go around,
Okay.
when you've got these guidelines and then you're throwing up, lattice.
Sure.
So,
You want to give us a quick...
Sure, and if you'll just allow me to strike the verbiage in section 2 and read you in a substantially similar section, then I'll just read one in right now.
Okay.
That all ordinances or parts of ordinances in conflict herewith are hereby repealed to the extent that the prior ordinance authorized a lower standard of appearance or cleanliness. I'll give that to you in writing. That was kind of fast. But basically what we're saying is anything that authorizes a lower standard of cleanliness or appearance, that's what's repealed. Nothing else is repealed.
Is that your motion?
yes, that covers it.
Second.
That takes care of it.
All right,
Okay,
motion
yeah.
made and seconded to amend in accordance with the city attorney's suggestion. On the motion?
That's just amendment now we're talking
Just
about.
the amendment. On the motion, Ms. Whitby?
Bryant?
Yes.
Ross?
Yes.
Robinson?
Yes.
Thomas?
Yes.
Gaines?
Yeah.
Parker?
Yes.
Height?
Yes.
Now to have a motion to adopt as amended.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
On the motion to adopt as amended.
Bryant?
Yes.
Ross?
Yes.
Robinson?
Yes.
Thomas?
No.
Gaines?
Yes.
Parker?
Yes.
Height?
Yes.
On the emergency, Bryant?
Yes.
Ross?
Yes.
Robinson?
Yes.
Thomas?
Yes.
Gaines?
Yes.
Parker?
Yes.
Height?
Yes.
Next item, ordinance 07136.
Boys, we'll see what kind of job y'all do and, see whether or not we're going to mend you out of existence between now and the end of the year. Next item.
Ordinance 07136, Mayor Hayes.
Let me see what that is. Please call it.
This is an ordinance granting a conditional use to allow an auto accessories installation business in a C3 zone for certain real property located at 3701 JFK Boulevard in the city of North Little Rock, Arkansas. Second reading.
I know that the two, and I don't assume they've changed their position, the two council members of that ward are not supporting it in accordance with our city attorney's comments about us addressing that. I'll be happy to see if anybody wants to move to suspend the rules. If not, then it'll stay on the agenda until the next council meeting. Next council meeting, then. Next item.
Resolution 0801, Mayor Hayes.
Please call it.
A resolution declaring certain buildings, houses, and other structures located at 521 Gardenia in the city of North Little Rock to constitute a public nuisance and condemning said structures, providing a period of time for property owner to abate said nuisance.
Let me get a motion, then I'm going to have a public hearing, Mr. Carter, and do that. All right, motion made and seconded, and let me convene a public hearing regarding 521 Gardenia. The listed owner is HIM Kara Raymond Govan. That public hearing is now convened. Anyone here care to address the council on that? Going once? Yes, sir. If you got something to say, come on up now, because we're getting ready to act.
Mayor, while the gentleman's coming up here, can I ask why we didn't receive any pictures with this particular resolution?
You can ask. All right.
At least I didn't.
Nobody there.
Excuse me just a second. Let me ask Mr. Watt. Tom, go ahead and.
They should have been in there, were they not?
I didn't.
They're not.
Not for R0801, no.
All right. Can you identify yourself? Fill out a card, if you would. Make sure before you sit down and give that to Ms. Whitby.
My name is Raymond Govan, and I'm the pastor of Harvest Center Denominational Ministries. I had asked to, basically, I've gotten a permit to redo the house, to remodel it, to do the work on it, and they came and told me I couldn't, so that's why I'm here.
All right. Mr. Wadley, you want to come and give us a quick comment on your status and why we're here?
Yeah.
And have you had any opportunity to visit with Mr. Govan?
Ms. McHenry, my inspector, had made 2 appointments with Mr. Govan to do an inspection of the property, but for some reason he was not able to make either one of them. It's a property that's a result of a fire damage. It's got quite a history with it. Mr. Briley from the planning department went out and inspected the property, and Mr. Voyles could give you more information on that, but he stated that due to the conditions of the property and the way it was built currently, that it couldn't be brought back up as to current housing code without taking it completely down to the foundation.
I believe Ms. Abel wants to speak too. I have a card.
Okay.
My name's Shirley Abel, and I have lived next door to 521 Gardenia for the last 18 and a half years. I've got some other surrounding neighbors that this property has affected over the years. 521 has been a problem to the neighborhood for a long time. Out of the last 48 police complaints at this address, the last 25 included 9 disturbances, 1 shots fired, 1 animal bite, 3 for a wanted person, 3 warrants served, 3 assault and battery, 3 for threats, and 2 were for narcotics violations, and I can pretty much give you the story on these calls. Mr. Govan had his permit and waited till close to the expiration date to even get started. On December the 28th, 2007, the front door of the housing structure was left open. It stood unsecured until January the 3rd of this year, when code enforcement came through and secured the building for us. Currently, the front yard has become a garden for growing empty bottles. It's become nothing more than a dumping ground. And I don't think it's the neighborhood's responsibility to contact the property owner every time something needs to be done. The house has aluminum wiring in it, which we know is not safe. The roof is sagging, it's got multiple layers on it, and the house on the other side of it is approximately maybe 4 feet from this structure. We were fortunate that the house on the other side did not catch fire when this burned. In the summertime, we can smell the sewage when it's leaking in the yard, but according to the health department, until it bubbles up, there's not much that they can do about it. We've had problems with roaches and rats every time the house rolls over with a new tenant. It averages a new tenant every 3 months. That tells you about the condition of it. And normally, it's been rented to the families who can least afford it that have children. At the time that the house was caught on fire, it was not insured. Mr. Govan, it is my understanding that in the past he's had a couple of halfway houses that the city has had to go in and shut down because of safety violations. He did not have a business license or meet zoning codes during this time. We feel that if he's given the opportunity to try to bring this house up to code, it's going to become a halfway house, which is the last thing that our neighborhood needs at this point. We were fortunate when the house caught on fire that the children inside managed to get out. Our biggest fear over the years has been that someone's going to go out in a body bag. And we're a neighborhood, we care about each other, we look out for each other. And to be honest with you, I don't want to have to go to bed worrying about the next tenant that's in there. We've been more than patient in working with the city to get this problem resolved, and we feel like now that it's time that our investments, which are owner-occupied, are considered. We'd rather have an empty lot at this location than to have to continue to deal with this problem. And I do have some photographs that were taken of the property this afternoon, and I apologize for not having a copy for all of you, but this is what it looked like this afternoon. Thank you.
All right, unless there's anyone else, I'm going to go ahead and adjourn the public hearing. Yes, ma'am? And you need to fill out a card or, keep Miss Whitby off of my back. Oh, you got one. Good.
Mayor.
Yes,
May
ma'am.
I ask Mr. Govan a question?
Sure.
Govan.
Ms. Govan, one of our council ladies, Ms. Robinson.
How long have you owned this property?
About 6 months.
You've owned it for 6 months.
Yes, ma'am.
And it was your property when it caught on fire?
No, it wasn't.
So you bought this house burned down in this condition?
It was actually donated.
The house was donated to you?
I pastor a church, and it's not a halfway house, it's a church, and it was donated to the church.
So is it your intention to put a halfway or a treatment facility there?
No.
What's your intent?
Well, we have families that are working and need housing that would like to do some work on it or rebuild on that same location. Husband and wives with children. And I think it's unfair not to give a person a chance. Everybody deserves a chance. And I don't see any reason why it can't be brought up and improve the neighborhood rather than bring it down. I have a house on Lynch Drive, and we're right over there by the church, by the school. We care about the neighborhoods too. So that's my only intent, is to try to get it fixed up.
And I'm curious, how much do you estimate it would take to bring this house back up to code?
Well,
because I'm reading the layers, the roofs and the electrical and...
I haven't did all of the research for it, because when we were stopped, I just basically kind of gave up, because I didn't think that, there's no reason to fight the people that live right there. I live on Lynch Drive too, and if someone wanted to put something beside me, I'd question it too. So I really haven't did the research. I would figure around 20 or 25,000.
Alderman Gaines?
Yes, when did the city stop you from moving forward? When was that? You said you've had it 6 months. When did they
Yes, sir.
stop you?
I don't have the exact date. I went down to the city hall and asked about it, and they just said to stop.
So like 3 months after you bought it, or a month after?
About that, about 3 months, yes.
So you waited about 3 months to start on it? Is that what you're saying?
We were trying to make sure we get some plans together and get the money together to do it, so we wouldn't have to start a project and not be able to finish it.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Yes, ma'am.
My name's Karen Mycoby, and in the pictures you can see how far my house is to 521, about 4 feet. the day that it caught on fire, just so happens, we had just left about 5-10 minutes before it caught on fire. I have seen plenty of drug dealing going in and out of that house and people getting arrested. We just want the house down because, like Miss April said, we got problems with bugs. People going in and out, they don't stay very long. And I'm afraid one of these days that my children are going to see more than drug dealers coming in and out of that house. Like she said, people in body bags. If my husband hadn't been at home the day that that house caught on fire, my house would have been gone too. Luckily, he was there to save our house.
Thank you very much.
City Attorney.
You can sit down, sir, if you like.
Thank you, Mr. Thank you. We go ahead and condemn this and tear it down. Do we give him a bill for it? I mean, he just got the church receipt.
Normally, yes. Oftentimes when we have houses that are condemned, though, code's able to work with the owner of the facility, and they can get, especially when you've got an organization behind you, you can get your members involved and get it removed without incurring a bill for the tear down.
Alderman Height.
Mr. Wadley, I noticed that the pictures that you supplied us are dated back to as early as April of 2005.
05. That's how long.
When was the
it's-
original fire? When was the fire? In June of last year?
Yes, sir. The
Okay.
fire was in June of last year, but we've been in and out and back and forth to that house. It was originally owned by the Lewis family, who sold it to the Skinner family. The Skinner family didn't file the paperwork on it. I believe they tried to give it to Mr. Govan, but he couldn't get it from Mr. Skinner, so he had to go back to the Lewises. This has quite a...
So how long, we've had this
quite a history.
house on the radar screen now for about almost 2 years.
At least.
Has it been in front of city council before?
No, sir. And it hasn't been up for condemnation before.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Let me, did we get a motion on this, Ms. Whitby? I think we were in public hearing. We got a motion on this.
Move for adoption.
Motion made and seconded. I think the neighborhood has been living with this house, Mr. Govan, too long. I don't know what the council do, but if it comes to me, I certainly would vote to move forward with the condemnation. The thing that I'm relying my vote on is, if I have one, is the fact that tearing it down would be much more economic, or at least more economical than perhaps building or trying to rehab that existing house. With that, Ms. Whitby?
Bryant?
Yes.
Ross?
Yes.
Robinson? Yes. Thomas?
Yes.
Gaines?
Yes.
Parker?
Yes.
Height?
Yes.
Don't get a vote, do I, Ms. Whitby?
No, sir.
Okay, next item,
Resolution 0802, Mayor Hayes.
please call it.
A resolution declaring certain buildings, houses, and other structures located at number 24 Neal Place in the city of North Little Rock to constitute a public nuisance and condemning such structures, providing a period of time for property owner to abate said nuisance.
Do I get a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Public hearing on 24 Neal Place on condemnation. The listed owner is Fred Wilson. Anybody here that wants to talk about 24 Neal Place? The owner's listed as Fred Wilson. Going once, going twice on the motion.
Bryant?
Yes.
Ross?
Yes.
Robinson? Yes. Thomas?
Yes.
Gaines? Parker? Height?
Yes.
Resolution 0803, Mayor Hayes.
Please call
A
it.
resolution declaring certain buildings, houses, and other structures located at 816 North Magnolia in the city of North Little Rock to constitute a public nuisance and condemning such structures, providing a period of time for property owner to abate said nuisance.
Move for adoption.
Is there a second?
Second.
Public hearing on 816 North Magnolia. That's 816 North Magnolia. The listed owner is Loving Care, Inc., care of Ross King. The listed owner is Loving Care, Inc., care of Ross King. Anyone care to comment about that, this legislation or that address? Going once, going twice on the motion.
Bryant?
Yes.
Ross?
Yes.
Robinson? Yes. Thomas?
Yes.
Gaines? Parker?
Yes.
Height?
Yes.
0804, Mayor Hayes.
Please call it.
A resolution declaring certain houses, buildings, and other structures located at 1522 Share in the city of North Little Rock to constitute a public nuisance and condemning said structures, providing a period of time for property owner to abate said nuisance.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Move. Second.
Motion made and seconded. The public hearing called on 1522 Share. That's 1522 Share. The listed owner is Farmers Bank and Trust Company, care of Ross King. That's Farmers Bank and Trust Company, care of Ross King. Does anyone care to address the council on that address or this legislation? On the motion.
Bryant?
Yes.
Ross?
Yes.
Robinson?
Yes.
Thomas?
Yes.
Gaines? Parker?
Yes.
Height?
Yes.
Resolution 0805, Mayor Hayes.
Please call it.
A resolution authorizing the mayor and city clerk to sell certain property located on Fort Roots Drive in the city of North Little Rock.
Can I get a motion and I'll explain it?
So moved.
Is there, Mr. Voiles is due a great deal of credit for this opportunity, as I see it. We have been working with the National Park Service. Robert, what's the agency? Yeah, the National Park Service. This is some land, I think it probably is reflected in a map, that is up at the top of the old entrance to Fort Roots, adjacent to the fence on the outside. It's parkland that the city has owned for a long time. We acquired, if you'll recall, the quarry property a number of years ago. We have been trying to work with Pulaski Tech to work with Fort Roots in a property exchange that would help expand the activities of Pulaski Technical College. And in that exchange, we put an easement. Now, help me if I make a mistake on this, Robert. We put an easement on the property, some of the property that we acquired in the quarry, in exchange for freeing up some land. This parcel is one of that, or part of that, in addition to some additional land that we would hope to work with Pulaski Tech in assisting them with an expansion. So this land was removed from the restriction about public use and gives us the ability to dispose of it. We all know River City Recovery Centers, or Recovery Centers of Arkansas. They're located down on River Road. This city council has supported by closing roads as well as donating property in several instances for the Alcohol Recovery Center, and they do great work and have been very active down there for a number of years. This area is somewhat, I won't say remote, but in a part of Fort Roots that's not used much but by perhaps bikers who are trying to pedal up that hill or people who work for Fort Roots, and would be an excellent place for this recovery center to relocate from the bottom of the hill, as they have been in discussions with Ms. Farrell as well as Mr. Jackson. And I know I certainly, obviously support this, and would hope the council would agree to continue supporting this worthwhile cause. It's the appraised value. We would be retaining some land on the north side of the rock wall. There is a possibility we may want to do something in terms of a hospitality house or otherwise with that. Again, this legislation would indicate that if, for example, any other land would be freed up, and I don't know that that'll happen, but that's always a possibility, that we look to River City for a first right of refusal, as well as to allow them to use some of the additional land up there for parking or other uses that would be permitted under the easement restrictions. So, with that, I would certainly hope the council would support this and support this worthwhile organization. Any questions, I'll be happy to answer. Motion made and seconded. Ms. Whitby?
Bryant?
Yes.
Ross?
Yes.
Robinson? Thomas?
Yes.
Gaines? Parker?
Yes.
Height?
Yes.
Resolution 0806.
Mr. Dietz is former state representative, is in the audience, former president of the North Little Rock Chamber, and I understand on the board of the Recovery Center. And Mr. Dietz, we want to again underline our appreciation for the work that your River City does, and we all know it's a terrific place up there. I think it'll be an opportunity for us all to continue to support your work and continue to do in a very accessible area.
I want to thank the...
You want to come to the microphone so everybody can...
He fill out a card, Mayor.
Fill out a card.
You can deal with Miss Whitby on that.
I'll fill out a card. Mayor and council, it's really a pleasure to come before you tonight and have you approve this sale. This is something that not only will help recovery centers further their mission, it will also allow Ms. Farrell and her husband to purchase our property, and they are moving ahead with I think a tremendous project, and we did not want to stand in the way of that progress, but as we learn throughout life, you have to have some place to go before you get rid of something. So now I want you to know that with the purchase of this property, we will probably be spending in excess of $3 million for our new facility. And again, I really want to thank you.
It's our pleasure, and again, we appreciate the work that your board and you, and I know Ms. Carol Baxter, who's also a part of our official family in somewhat of an unofficial way, in the sense that her husband, Charlie, has been, a long-time key part of the staff here at the city, and so we appreciate, Carol, also the board and the work that you do out for the Recovery Center. With that, thanks very much. Next item.
Resolution 0806, Alderman Bryant. A resolution authorizing the mayor and city clerk to execute an easement from the city of North Little Rock, Arkansas for the North Little Rock Wastewater Department.
No, it's a motion. It's a resolution.
Move for adoption.
Yeah. On the motion?
Bryant?
Yes.
Ross?
Yes.
Robinson?
Yes.
Thomas?
Yes.
Gaines?
Yes.
Parker?
Yes.
Height?
Yes.
Resolution 0807, Alderman Gaines.
Please call it.
A resolution requesting the state legislature to authorize cities of the first class to impose greater punishments for the illegal discharge of firearms.
Move for adoption.
Is there a second? Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Discussion? Alderwoman Ross, did you have a question?
Is Chief Bradley here?
Chief? He is.
I'd just like to hear what he has to say about it.
Good evening.
I'd like to have your take on this. What do you think?
I certainly don't think it will hurt anything and could be a deterrent. Our major problem has been being able to catch the violators, but if you've got an idea on how to do that, we'd certainly be open to hear that. But
We got some cameras that are coming out.
got
so
some
maybe-
cameras that may be of some assistance with that in the future, but
One of the things I want to mention this while we talk about it. I know I shared this with Alderman Gaines. There's a friend of mine who was former mayor of Denver, Colorado, and he was in his backyard on the 4th of July. This has been a number of years ago, and his father-in-law was there, and someone had shot a pistol up in the air. And although it I'm sure is rare when it happened to his father-in-law, that the bullet came down right on the top of his head and killed him. So this action is dangerous and does kill people. Obviously, this is asking the legislature to do something. It certainly doesn't mean that they will, but it does, in my mind, show some intent on this council to try to do whatever we can to not tolerate this kind of action. And I know there's headlines, I believe, in our local paper that indicated it was pretty prominent during the New Year's Eve celebration. So, a message perhaps is something that's important, and this would certainly do it.
I have a question have we caught anybody doing this?
we arrested one New Year's Eve night.
This prior New Year's Eve?
This prior New Year's Eve night. We were also able to identify, I believe, 3 houses where people went into the house. We did not witness them. We weren't able to make the arrest at the time or and we don't have enough evidence to make the arrest.
This is going to more be like citizen complaints than anything,
But-
similar to the noise ordinance?
But on those cases, we are making contact with the owner of those homes and talking to them about it.
But unless we catch them in the act, it's
That's
going to
been
be tough to prosecute.
That's been the difficulty. Most of these cases are people stepping outside the door, stepping out in their yard, blasting a few caps, and they're back in the house, especially when they see lights coming down the street, police car coming down the street. We had some of this last year. We anticipated it. I think we had 43 officers on the street New Year's Eve night, just in anticipation of this, and had some of them stationed in the areas where we had had problems last year with it. Fortunately, no one was hurt.
Alderman Thomas?
Out in our neighborhood, they even shoot the cable out, so it's really bad in our area, especially around Christmas time or New Year's, and they shouldn't do it, but they do it. I know our cable was shot out one with I guess it was about a year ago.
Everyone's comment on that. The only thing I want to say, thank you, Chief, but this came from Amboy Crime Prevention. There's 4 crime prevention groups out there. I know nobody's going to make light of that, but whether someone's caught or not caught, we need to send some kind of statement that this is just ridiculous when they come out and shoot guns off. It came to the city attorney's office and went down there, and one of his employees lives in Park Hill, one of his employees lives in Lakewood, and they both heard the gunfire on New Year's Eve, and that's a hint. I mean, why I want to bring this together and try to get it passed. And we can't do anything about it. We're going to try to do something about it, and the legislature controls the whole NRA legislature, so we have to at least just to ask them to do it. Tracy Steele said he would probably be interested in looking at something like this.
On the
Thank you,
motion?
Mayor.
Bryant?
Yes.
Ross?
Yes.
Robinson?
Yes.
Thomas?
Yes.
Gaines? Parker?
Yes.
Height?
Yes.
Ordinances, ordinance 0801, Mayor Hayes.
Please call it.
This is an ordinance authorizing the issuing of electric system revenue bonds to provide working capital for the electric system, authorizing a trust indentures securing the bonds, authorizing the sale of the bonds and the execution of a bond purchase agreement in connection therewith, authorizing and prescribing other matters pertaining thereto. First reading.
If we could go ahead and take it to third reading, then we'll visit about it, if we would.
Move to suspend the rules, place on the second reading.
Is there a second?
Second.
On the motion?
Bryant?
Yes.
Ross?
Yes.
Robinson?
Yes.
Thomas?
Yes.
Gaines? Parker?
Yes.
Height?
Yes.
An ordinance authorizing the issuing of electric system revenue bonds to provide working capital for the electric system, authorizing a trust indenture securing the bonds, authorizing the sale of the bonds and the execution of a bond purchase agreement in connection therewith, authorizing and prescribing other matters pertaining thereto. Second reading.
Move to suspend the rules, place on third reading.
Second.
On the motion?
Bryant?
Yes.
Ross?
Yes.
Robinson?
Yes.
Thomas?
Yes.
Gaines?
Yes.
Parker?
Yes.
Height?
Yes.
An ordinance authorizing the issuing of electric system revenue bonds to provide working capital for the electric system, authorizing a trust indenture securing the bonds, authorizing the sale of the bonds and the execution of a bond purchase agreement in connection therewith, authorizing and prescribing other matters pertaining thereto. Third and final reading.
Mr. Sisson, if you'll come up there and let me just take a quick shot and any other questions any council member has. I think we've talked about this for some time. We filed a budget that did not include any rate increase. There was an assumption that was based on raising the projected revenue of the hydro plant from 5.6 million to 12.4 million, I believe. And while that was a fairly big step, we were very conservative as it ends up, even with the downtime that we had because of maintenance. We had additional maintenance. A lot of it was due to seal replacement, extraordinary wear on the seal, and all of us remember, for a prolonged period of time, we had a tremendous amount of water coming down from Oklahoma, which just literally shut the generation down. In addition to that, I'm going to point out that the first 3 months of the year were roughly, the credit was accruing on the hydro at roughly a half of what it is now accruing, because it was during the first months of when we were still receiving power at a what we now know, at least based on what we're paying now, at bargain basement prices. So with all of that, we still were able to accrue about $9.5 million in credit for the hydro plant as of the end of calendar year '07. So Mr. Gertz, who I think is out there in the audience, did a fairly detailed review based on average years and came up with the $12.6 million projection. If we hit that, then, in all likelihood, now let me back up just a second too, because with the end of last year, we were roughly $3.5 million ahead of or over budget. Now, I haven't gotten the final numbers on the revenue that we were projecting based on the rate increase, and from what I recall, that came in about $1 million less than what we projected. So the net benefit for both rates and hydro last year was about $2.5 million. That hopefully, if I'm not mistaken, we'll have an opportunity to utilize some of that for balancing the electric department's budget for '08. So we're starting out needing to generate about $10+ million. Now, this will give us the opportunity. Obviously, it's protection in case the hydro plant does not generate what we project. Now, there's very strong likelihood that it will, but there is a reasonable possibility that something might happen. It has in the past, and it could this time. But the projections are based on true realism with a tint towards some conservatism. And if we had to, what my obvious recommendation, you've heard it a number of times, is that when our rates go down and when Plum Point, and Mr. Gertz, to bring everyone up to date, Plum Point is on schedule, and when we start taking power from Plum Point in the spring of 2010, the cost of power will go from, at least if we're paying anywhere close to what we're paying now, from $80 a megawatt hour down to $45 a megawatt hour, and that will result in some significant savings. We're still working on other things. You've heard some of that with Plum Point 2 as well as Big Cajun. There are some issues that have come up with Big Cajun on transmission that if those can't be resolved, that project may have to go south on us, literally, and so that we're continuing to work on those other things, but not the least of which, there is an extreme likelihood that we won't have to borrow any money, and if we do, perhaps it will be more to meet cash flow because of the high power cost in the summer and doing similar to what we did this year and make up a lot on the hydro plant during the fall and winter months. So essentially, that's where we are. This is a safety valve. We might very well call on it. Hopefully, it'll just be for cash flow issues. Perhaps it won't be for any issues. But it would be here to preclude us from having to raise rates if something happened on the hydro plant. Is there any questions? Yes, ma'am?
Okay. You may have gone over this, and you may have lost me, but now, is this a line of credit? Or do we have to borrow the full $15 million and pay?
We will borrow it in the $100,000
That's
increments. We
Okay.
choose, if the attorney, when we make the amendment, we can choose at the first of every month how much we want to borrow, and we'll borrow it in increments of $100,000.
So essentially, it's a line of credit.
Okay, right. And this is only for the electric department? This is not for
Ma'am, it's only for electric
operations? It cannot go for anything else? We don't take anything out of electric and put over in operations, right?
We will not.
It's all?
It will go nowhere except electric. We'll go in the electric department.
Deal.
That's right.
Okay.
Any further questions? Alderman Gaines?
Yeah, this is what we were talking about earlier, the $15 million for the city. We're talking about this, what you and I were talking about earlier?
Yeah, no, this is simply for the electric.
Electric department, nothing else, and would you just kind of let us know when you do it, if we have to?
I tell you what, in fact, I'm glad you asked that. Mr. Gertz is he out there behind you? Oh, there he is. Sends me a daily log on the generation of the hydro plant, and I get a little bit behind over weekends, but we catch up. As of today, as of midnight last night, because I won't get today's results until tomorrow, we're about $160,000 ahead of budget with a total of about $650,000 of credit that we've received so far. So, we keep up with this, and we'll keep, we'll keep all of you informed, certainly as asked, or no later than a monthly basis, as to, whether we're getting behind the 8 ball or whether we're still ahead of it. At this point, we're $160,000 in the black, or in the black, I guess you could say. Jane Dickey is out in the audience, who is bond counsel, and any additional questions, this is something we hope not to have to use, but it'll be there if we do, and we'll keep you informed.
One other thing, Mayor, we will come back to this council to set the rates and who we're borrowing it from. That's in the ordinance also.
How much are we taking from the electric department now? 5 million?
5,000,006, I believe.
5.6?
Yes, it's here, 5.6, I'm almost sure.
Yeah, it's down. We're taking from the electric department something that's pretty much similar to what Energy pays as a franchise fee, about 6 to 7%, which is down from a high of 20 to 25%.
That's my point. I mean, we're down from 20-something to 5.
Yeah, and of course, everybody here will know, we raised rates 38%. The same cost of power went to Benton, and they raised rates 53%. So, we were able to keep ours down because of the hydro generation, because of, the election a little over a year ago, when the public allowed us to go from 50% capital and 50% operation to 75-25. That was $4 million. So we've worked real hard to keep those rates as low as we can, and this year will be the most difficult year. Next year will be a full 12 months, but power will go roughly from 43 million down to 40 million. And then, hallelujah, the next year I hope we're lowering rates. I think there's a good chance we will be. Yes.
Okay, if we have to borrow money this year, or for cash flow or whatever, will that delay bringing down the cost of electricity when we do go into our new contract? Because we'll be paying this out?
Well, the answer to that is yes. If we have to borrow to keep the rates, if the hydro doesn't generate and we have to borrow money, then the answer is yes. It would be my, understanding that we would pay that back by maintaining some level of higher rates to pay off that indebtedness. So the answer is an absolutely yes. I would hope we would be able to bring rates down and still be able to pay it off. But, right now my hope is we don't have to borrow any money.
And the final hydro payment, is that, I talked to Joe Follen, is it July 2015? Is that
the last payment is July 15th. We have enough money to pay it for the last year. So the last time we'll have to put in money is 2014.
2014.
Is that for the hydro?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, 2014. We have one payment in reserve in accordance with the bond indenture. So, 2014, that'll free up about $15 million a year when the hydro plant's paid off.
Mayor, the bad months are during the summertime. Why are we going ahead and borrowing it now? Do we have
We're not.
I know we're going to have a line of credit, but isn't there some charge for doing it this early?
Well, one of the things we have problems with is the first of the year is we have a cash flow deficit the first of the year. It's the cash flow. Actually the price is higher, our wholesale price is higher the first 5 months of the year than it is in the summer. So we will need the money during the cash flow for the first, for the first 5 months of the year, we'll be down $10 million, our cash flow projection. So we'll need it the first part of the year. If we need some, we'll need it then at that time.
If we need it.
If you need it.
Now, but if we, because I remember, during the summertime and until we got into the fall, we were really behind on our generation, but I probably generated, half of or 60% of our credit in the last 4 months, and that's for two reasons. One, because we had flows, and the other is because we were on the higher credit rate in terms of the doubling of the cost of power. So we'll keep you informed, and we hope that we don't have to put much in, and if we put some or take some out, we hope very much by the end of the year we'll square it up.
And that's right, correct, Mayor. If we borrow some, we have some extra money, we can pay these back. These will be no prepayment penalty on them.
Did this happen in 2007?
No.
Okay. Or 2006 either?
No, I mean, this
first time we've done this.
This will be the first time that we've done it, and we're doing it as we've talked through this because we didn't want to raise rates, and this is a safety valve in case something happens that our generation doesn't meet budget or timing wise.
I believe I'll get an amendment for the city attorney.
Which, these were distributed earlier. If you'll look on the second page, the word quarter has been stricken and the word month inserted. And then if you'll look on the third page, the word ordinance is stricken and the word resolution inserted. Those are the only changes to the ordinance.
And Alderman Bryant makes that motion to amend?
Yes, sir.
And Alderman Gaines seconded on the motion to amend?
Bryant?
Yes.
Ross?
Yes.
Robinson?
Yes.
Thomas?
Yes.
Gaines?
Yes.
Parker?
Yes.
And Height?
Yes.
Now a motion to adopt is amended.
So moved.
Second.
On the motion?
Bryant?
Yes.
Ross?
Yes.
Robinson?
Yes.
Thomas?
Yes.
Gaines?
Yes.
Parker?
Yes.
Height?
Yes.
On the emergency, Bryant?
Yes.
Ross?
Yes.
Robinson?
Yes.
Thomas?
Yes.
Gaines?
Yes.
Parker?
Yes.
And Height?
Yes.
Concludes new business.
Council comments?
I got a question, Mr. Marvin. Mr. Marvin? While Mr. Marvin's coming up here, the way the wind has been lately in North Little Rock and Central Arkansas, maybe we ought to look into one of those or two of those new wind turbines they're going to be building over.
We are.
Are we?
We
Good.
are.
Tonight, we had a communication about a speed hump on Longview, and it's rare that we don't entertain a communication, a request for a speed hump on city council. When we act upon these, we usually say yes and pass them on to you, and then you do a traffic study sometime in the next several months, and you'll report back to us one way or the other, whether you recommend or whether you don't recommend a speed hump. After we've installed a few speed humps in the past, have you done a traffic study to see if they're being effective?
Not in every case, but in many cases, yes.
Okay, in the future, when you do that, I'd like to hear the results of the traffic study to see if the speed hump is being effective, because I know we argue up here on occasion whether or not a speed hump is effective.
Be happy to do that. In every case, the speed humps are effective. Now, for what distance on either side of the hump do they have an effect? That's another question.
But at the speed hump itself, it slows traffic down.
Absolutely.
But
There's in every case.
Yeah. I know we recently installed one of those newer type speed humps over on Fairway.
And on Edgemere as well.
Okay. Have we done a traffic study on either of those two streets to see what the effectiveness of the installation is?
Have not on those two.
Do you have that planned in the near future?
I do. Those humps, as you, I'm sure, have noticed, are significantly different in design. Each of those two humps are different. What I'm trying to say is the two temporary ones or preformed ones are not the same. They're two different design styles. So we'll be looking at that to see if there's a preference there and a degree of effectiveness at one more so than the other.
Two I appreciate hearing about that.
Alderman Gaines and then Alderwoman Ross.
Alderman Parker and I are arguing. When were those two speed humps that you put in Ward 4, were they approved recently by this council, or was something that an alderman called down and asked you to do?
They weren't in Ward 4.
Oh, they're Ward 1 then. Ward 1 and, anyway, we have some we wanted to get done in Ward 3. And I noticed there were two done in Ward, I thought was 4, but it's 1, I guess. The two recent ones that used to try the new technology.
What you're asking, but
Alderman
I can say
Gaines
this.
is trying to
all
say.
of the speed hump.
One at a time. Alderman Gaines has the floor.
Yeah.
All of the speed humps are installed at the direction of the council.
All right, thank you. That's the only question. Okay.
Okay, that's enough. All right. Alderwoman Ross has the floor.
No, I just wanted to say one thing. I don't know about any surveys afterwards or whatever, but I know the residents are really happy with it, with the speed bump.
That's what we try to do.
That's right.
Alderman Parker?
I think the question is, were these speed humps, even though they're at the direction of the council installed, were there any preliminary petitions or review necessary, or were they expedited in some fashion?
John, you sat here and voted on them.
I'm okay with it. I'm just trying to clear it up for Alderman Gaines.
Alderman Parker has the floor. All right, let's move on.
Simple question.
I believe the answer to your question is that speed humps are only installed as so directed by this council.
We discussed.
Hey, so we're getting off on a,
I have one point. We discussed the temporary and the permanent issue of these particular speed humps in city council. Mr. Marvin gave us a very explicit description of what we were getting ready to install on Fairway and down on Edgemere. So it came from petitions for the people that lived on the streets, and that's where they came from.
Alderwoman
I think
Ross.
the question is, were the petitions filed appropriately, and were the traffic studies done? And yes, on both cases, on both of those.
Next item. Any other council member? Alderman Thomas.
It's not on the speed dump, though.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Marvin.
Let's bump on down the road.
It still bothers me that if we call someone to speak, that they have to fill out a card. And I'm also, the visually impaired, I'm sure a blind person would have a difficult time finding it out. And that's always bothered me. I know for 20 years we didn't have to do that. That's just a comment. Nobody else, I'm sure, cares but me.
We appreciate your comment.
I have one final one. The positive one, saw Patrick Lane come in, and we had a Senate Kill Crime Prevention meeting the other night, and they were so complimentary of him and what he's done. We appreciate him. And I need to, if Tim Marvin wouldn't mind staying for a moment, I'd love to talk to him for a minute.
I'm sure he'll be happy to.
Okay, thank you.
Microphone's open. Anybody that would care to address the council?
Good evening, council members. My name is Jim R., and I hope everybody had a happy new year. I had the privilege of attending a sign board meeting the other day for adjustments, and a council member accused me of doing something that didn't really go down the way it said. But I want to congratulate the sign board for not undoing the rules that Murray Witcher has set forth. And a couple of council members are fixing to come back to you and try to redo some of these rules. They said this particular location had a hardship. They used the snow cone location as the hardship. I've driven down Camp Robinson, and I see no hardship with the snow cone location. I see hardship with the sign that says there's road repair, which I don't think needs to be there now if the road is finished, and there's another sign framework that's there. Coming from the other direction, I don't see a hardship. But it isn't right when Alderman Witcher, and y'all know he and I don't agree on everything, gets up and makes all these rules, and yet you got council members that's determined to redo them because he doesn't like them or he wants to help his buddies out. Anyway, Mayor, on the first meeting of December, I asked you a question. You said you'd have to think on it. The next meeting, I asked you to go out in the field. I'd like to meet with you and Mr. Brewer for about 5 minutes to share something with you that you need to know. Are you agreeable to do that?
Mr. Art, I'll see you right after this meeting.
Thank you.
The sooner you sit down, the faster we'll talk. Any other one wants to speak to the council? Do I have a motion?
So moved.
On the motion.
Bryant. Ross. Robinson. Thomas. Gaines. Parker. Height.
Yes. What's that? No, I was waiting to end.